You ever been, stuck in traffic, someone just cuts you off, or maybe your phone just freezes up again, and you feel this surge of frustration, way bigger than the actual problem seems.
Oh, definitely.
That's the feeling we're really diving into today. Anger, often pretty confusing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're taking a proper deep dive into the psychology of anger using some really thorough insights from Sensei.
And for you, the learner, if you want to grasp these complex topics quickly, get those aha moments without feeling overwhelmed. Well, that's what we're here for. We'll unpack what anger really is, what's actually going on in your brain and body when it flares up. We'll even look at why we evolved to feel this way, which is fascinating, and importantly, give you practical ways to handle it constructively.
Yeah, moving beyond just the definition, we want to understand its purpose, how it can even sometimes be a catalyst for positive change.
Exactly. All while keeping it engaging, easy to follow. So, okay, let's jump in. From a psychological view, what is anger? We all know the feeling, but what's the textbook take?
Well, psychologically speaking, it's seen as an emotion, right? Characterized by this feeling of antagonism, usually towards something or someone you perceive has deliberately harmed you or acted unjustly.
Mechanism.
Okay. And it's not just a feeling. It's really a mix. Your emotional state, your thoughts, even your body's physical reactions all rolled into one.
So it's more than just like feeling hot under the collar or yelling.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The key characteristics include feelings of tension, hostility, often stemming from frustration, maybe feeling injured, whether that's real or just perceived, or sensing unfairness. And the intensity, as we all know, can vary wildly. Mild annoyance right up to, intense rage.
And physically, what's
You
happening?
get increased muscle tension, for sure.
Yeah.
And changes in your nervous system, your hormones.
Yeah.
The neuroendocrine and autonomic systems kick in.
And the thinking part, that cognitive aspect you mentioned, that seems huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
When you're angry, you tend to fall into specific thought patterns. You might interpret things negatively, start mobilizing your coping resources. You become more sensitive to potential threats, maybe even have like destructive fantasies or start planning aggressive responses, sometimes even feeling persecuted.
Wow.
But the really crucial bit here is what psychologists call cognitive appraisal, is how you interpret a situation. That's fundamental to the anger response itself.
How you see it determines how you feel about it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the really valuable thing is, if you can learn to shift those interpretations, those appraisals, you gain a massive amount of control over managing your anger.
So it's less about the event, more about the story we tell ourselves about it.
Exactly. Changing that story is often the first and maybe most powerful step.
Yeah, that puts a lot more control back in our hands. Okay, so we often mix up anger with aggression or hostility. Are they basically the same thing, just different words?
That's a really, really common confusion, and it's important to clear it up. They're distinct. Anger is the emotion, that internal feeling we're talking about.
Okay.
Aggression, on the other hand, is a behavior, an action intended to cause harm.
Behavior. Got it.
Now, feeling angry can definitely activate aggressive behavior,
Yeah.
but they aren't tied together one-to-one. You can feel incredibly angry and not act aggressively at all.
Right.
And conversely, sometimes aggression happens without any real anger behind it, like instrumental aggression, where someone acts aggressively just to get something they want. It's calculated, not emotional.
Okay, so feeling that inner burn doesn't automatically mean you're going to lash out.
Not at all. And then you mentioned hostility. Hostility is broader. It's more like an enduring negative attitude.
An attitude.
Yeah, think cynicism, resentment, a general distrust of others. It's like fertile ground where anger and aggression can easily grow. People who are generally more hostile tend to get angry more often and more intensely.
Okay, so anger is the spark, aggression is one possible fire, and hostility is like the dry tinder that makes the spark more likely.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, anger itself can show up in different ways. Sometimes it pushes us to actually fix the problem, find a solution. Other times, it's more expressive shouting, swearing. But the key is, anger doesn't have to equal aggression. And that opens up possibilities for healthier expression like assertiveness. We'll definitely get into that.
This is really helpful, clearing up those terms. But still, there's this feeling, this cultural idea maybe, that anger is just bad, always negative. Is that true?
No, not at all. Actually, anger is a completely normal human emotion. And often, it's healthy. It serves some really important functions.
Like what? How can anger be healthy?
Well, it can be a way to express negative feelings when something genuinely isn't right. It acts like an internal signal, telling you a need isn't met or a boundary's been crossed. And it can be a powerful motivator. It can push you to find solutions, to stand up for yourself when you need to.
So that feeling we often try to squash down,
Hmm.
it could actually be useful?
Absolutely. From an evolutionary standpoint, anger can be a source of strength. It provides energy for constructive action, overcoming obstacles, achieving goals,
Yeah.
if it's channeled right, of course.
Okay, okay. So it has a purpose, but we all know it can become a problem. When does that normal, maybe even helpful feeling cross the line?
It becomes problematic when it gets excessive, like happening too often,
Yeah.
or the intensity is way out of proportion to the situation, or when it's expressed inappropriately, aggressively, hurtfully, or when you just feel like it's totally out of your control. That's when it leads to trouble. Physical health problems,
Sure.
mental health issues, damaged relationships, destructive behaviors. The list goes on.
So the challenge isn't getting rid of anger altogether.
Probably impossible, and maybe not even desirable.
Right. It's more about understanding its messages and managing how we express it, being the conductor, like you said.
Exactly. Managing the expression effectively.
Okay. So we've got a clearer picture of what anger is. Let's get into the science. What is actually happening inside our brains and bodies when that anger hits?
Right. When anger gets triggered, it sets off this really complex chain reaction in your brain and body. Your brain is the command center, and a few key areas jump into action.
Okay, who are the main players here? Let's meet the brain's anger squad.
Huh. Okay, first up, you've got the amygdala. Think of it as the brain's quick response alarm system. It's deep inside, and it processes threat-related emotions, fear, anxiety, and definitely anger.
The alarm bell.
Yeah, it's super fast.
Yeah.
Detects potential threats, links emotions to sensory info, links them to memories. When you feel angry, especially if there's an impulse towards aggression, the amygdala lights up. It's crucial for those immediate gut reactions.
So back to the traffic example, that initial jolt of bark, that's the amygdala.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Your amygdala shouting, hey, threat, or at least something's wrong.
But surely there's something to, like, put the brakes on.
Thankfully, yes. That's where the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, comes in. The front part of your brain responsible for higher-level thinking, planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation.
Yeah, executive control.
Exactly. Specifically, a part called the medial prefrontal cortex, or MPFC, seems key in controlling those subcortical structures, like the amygdala. It assesses the alarm signal, considers the context, the consequences, and ideally, it modulates the anger response.
So it tries to calm the amygdala down.
Or at least manage it.
Yeah.
But if the MPFC isn't regulating effectively, well, that's when people might have difficulty controlling anger, leading to more impulsive or aggressive reactions.
So the amygdala yells, fire!
Yeah.
And the PFC ideally says, okay, hold on, let's assess. Maybe it's just toast.
Exactly. It provides that reasoned override. Now, there are other regions involved, too. The dorsal pons in the brainstem gets more active during anger, sensitive to that whole body arousal thing. Interestingly, areas involved in visual processing and attention sometimes show reduced activity when we're angry.
Reduced. Why?
It might explain that tunnel vision we get, that narrowed focus, maybe impaired judgment. Your brain is pouring resources into dealing with the perceived threat, leaving less for, the big picture.
Right, seeing red, you don't really notice the details around you.
Precisely. And there's also the default mode network, the DMN. That's the network active during inward thoughts, self-reflection.
Okay.
Research suggests that better connectivity within the DMN is linked to better anger control. So our internal self-talk seems really important.
Huh.
If the DMN is dysregulated, maybe through rumination, just going over and over the angry thoughts, it can make anger worse. A healthy DMN might help us reappraise, regulate, step back from the anger. There's even some evidence suggesting structural differences, like the amount of gray matter in certain areas, might be linked to trait anger, like a general proneness to getting angry.
Wow, so the actual physical structure could play a part?
It seems possible. And then there's the idea of low road versus high road processing.
Low road, high road.
Yeah, think of two pathways for emotional info. The low road is super fast, direct, senses straight to the amygdala. It's reflexive, happens before conscious thought. That immediate flash of anger.
Got it.
The high road is slower. Info goes through the cortex first analysis, appraisal, then to the amygdala. This allows for conscious thought, modulation, explains why sometimes anger hits instantly, other times we think it through.
That makes so much sense, that difference between snapping immediately versus taking a breath.
Exactly. And get this, even subliminal anger cues, things you're not consciously aware of, can trigger physiological changes like increased blood pressure and mess with your thinking.
Seriously, unconscious triggers.
Yeah, which might explain why sometimes we react in ways that feel totally irrational, or our mood shifts and we don't know why. It really highlights the need for self-awareness, tuning into those subtle bodily reactions. Your body might be reacting before your conscious mind even catches up.
That's incredible. So deeply wired. Okay, let's talk chemicals. We hear about hormones raging. What's in that chemical cocktail when we get angry?
Right, when anger hits, your brain signals the release of key hormones. It's the body's internal alarm system gearing up. The classic ones are adrenaline and cortisol.
The stress hormones.
Yep, released by the adrenal glands. Part of that fight or flight response. Adrenaline gives you that immediate energy burst, heart rate up, blood pressure up. Cortisol ramps up blood sugar, gets glucose to your brain, prepares tissues for repair, basically prepping for physical action.
Okay, that's the jolt. Anything else?
Testosterone is also linked. Some studies show anger can temporarily increase testosterone levels, and higher baseline testosterone is sometimes associated with more aggression or dominance, at least in certain contexts.
Okay, adrenaline for energy, testosterone maybe for assertiveness or aggression. What about cortisol? Does it have a specific role in anger?
Cortisol is actually, well, it's complicated. Some lab studies inducing anger found cortisol levels actually decreased, especially with what's called approach-motivated or offensive anger, like anger aimed at overcoming something.
Decrease. That's surprising.
Yeah. But higher cortisol might be linked more to defensive fear-based anger or chronic hostility. It suggests different types of anger might have different hormonal signatures,
Right.
which could influence how we experience it and maybe even what management strategies work best. If it's problem-solving anger versus feeling threatened anger, the approach might differ. It's not just one simple response.
Really interesting. Not one size fits all. And you mentioned fight or flight. How does that whole system kick in?
That hormonal surge we just talked about, that's what triggers it, that ancient survival mechanism. It's a rapid physiological cascade preparing you to either confront the threat or run away.
What does that look like in the body?
Your brain quickly shunts blood away from things like digestion towards your major muscles. Heart rate, blood pressure, especially systolic, the top number, breathing rate, all increase. More oxygen pumping around, you might start sweating. Your mind becomes hyper alert, often really narrowly focused on the threat. Your whole system goes on high alert, ready for a physical confrontation.
Even if the threat is just a frustrating email or a slow computer?
Exactly. It's preparing for a physical battle, regardless of the trigger.
And being on high alert all the time,
Yeah.
that can't be good long term.
Precisely. Fantastic for escaping a predator. But when it's constantly triggered by psychological stressors, work pressure, relationship issues, perceived unfairness, the chronic activation takes a real toll on long-term health.
Yeah, must be exhausting, damaging. So all these brain signals and hormones, they translate into things we actually feel physically, right?
But-
What are those bodily signs of anger?
Yes, absolutely. And recognizing these physical sensations is really key for early intervention. It's like your body's early warning system.
What should we look out for?
Common signs include that increased heart rate, maybe a pounding feeling in your chest, rapid shallow breathing. Muscle tension is a big one, clenching your jaw, making fists, tense shoulders or neck. It might feel hot, flushed in the face or neck. Sweating, headaches, a feeling of pressure in your head, stomach churning, maybe trembling or shaking, dizziness, even tingling sometimes.
Wow, quite a list.
And these are all direct results of that neural and hormonal activity. Your body gearing up for action, it's literally trying to tell you, hey, something significant is happening here.
Learning to listen to those signals seems crucial. Okay, so we know what it is, what happens inside us. Let's step back. Why did we even evolve this emotion? What's the evolutionary story?
That's a great question. Evolutionary psychology offers some really compelling ideas. The basic premise is that emotions, anger included, are adaptations shaped by natural selection over vast timescales.
Adaptations. So they helped our ancestors survive.
That's the idea. They evolved because they helped solve recurring problems related to survival and reproduction. Anger wasn't just random static. It served functions.
Like what kind of functions?
Think about it. Anger shows up very early in infancy. It's universal across cultures, has a specific neural basis, and we even share some expressions with other primates. That points to deep biological roots. It likely evolved to provide motivational fuel, mobilizing energy to overcome obstacles blocking resources or safety, deterring rivals or aggressors by signaling you're ready to fight, defending territory, food, mates. And within social groups, it might have helped enforce social contracts, punish cheaters, maintain cooperation. Emotions coordinate our systems to deal with situations common in our ancestral past.
So it wasn't just about losing your temper, it was about survival resources, social order back then. That's a
Yeah.
different lens.
It really is. And there's a specific evolutionary model called the recalibrational theory of anger that focuses on its social function.
Recalibrational theory. Okay.
It suggests anger evolved primarily as a kind of bargaining program, a tool to resolve conflicts of interest in your favor within social relationships.
Bargaining. How does that work?
The core idea is that anger motivates the target of your anger to value your welfare more, to increase their welfare trade-off ratio, or WTR, towards you. Basically, how much they care about your outcomes versus their own.
So getting angry is like saying, hey, you need to care about me more in this situation.
Kind of, yeah. The theory proposes anger is triggered when you perceive someone isn't giving your needs enough weight. Their WTR towards you is too low. Expressing anger then communicates implicitly, increase my WTR, or I might impose costs or withhold benefits. It's seen as a largely unconscious evolved strategy.
Wow.
The theory even suggests our propensity to get angry and how effective it is might link to our formidability,
Oh.
our ability to inflict costs, and our benefit conferral value, our ability to provide benefits.
So stronger or more valuable individuals might get angry more easily because it works for them.
That's one implication. Historically, maybe stronger individuals, often men, found anger a more successful recalibration tactic. It's a negotiation, albeit often unspoken.
That feels quite strategic for something that often feels so impulsive.
It does. And the theory includes recalibration sensitivity. Different people have different thresholds for feeling slighted or undervalued. This sensitivity is shaped by genes, learning, culture, which is important because it connects the evolutionary ideas with individual differences. Our anger programs aren't totally fixed. They can be modulated by experience. That offers hope for interventions. Some people just have more sensitive, not valued enough detectors.
Okay, so beyond the bargaining, what other adaptive roles did anger play?
Well, it's also crucial for signaling injustice and boundary violations. It's an internal alarm and an external signal. Something's wrong here, my goals are blocked, expectations violated, norms transgressed. It prompts corrective action. It also helps discourage exploitation. Reacting angrily to unfairness makes others less likely to exploit you again, promoting fairness and cooperation. And fundamentally, it triggers fight or flight for self-preservation against threats, physical or psychological.
It's fascinating, but also a bit worrying how these mechanisms evolved for small groups might play out now in our complex world.
That's a critical point. Mechanisms evolved when individual strength mattered might be maladaptive today. Think of a leader's anger influencing global conflict. The scale is vastly different, but the underlying psychology might share roots. Our evolved responses aren't always suited for modern life.
Yeah.
Though it's interesting how these evolutionary ideas align somewhat with psychodynamic views. Anger as an internal signal for pursuing goals and an outward social signal for communication or recalibration, different fields converging on similar purposes.
It's like anger has these deep, ancient roots in survival and social life, even if we don't recognize them in the heat of the moment. Okay, let's bring it back to us now. What is my anger trying to tell me day to day? How do I decode that?
Shifting perspective here is key. See anger not just as an outburst to suppress, but as a signal, a messenger. It usually points to unmet needs or cross boundaries.
Unmet needs, like what?
Think fundamental human needs: safety, respect, love, autonomy, understanding, competence. When those are thwarted or ignored, anger can pop up as a protest, a demand, feeling unheard. The anger might stem from needing validation.
Okay, so the surface anger points deeper. What about boundaries?
Right. Our personal limits on acceptable treatment, interactions. When someone violates those, anger acts like a defense, an alert system. It signals the transgression and motivates us to reestablish the boundary.
Example.
A colleague taking credit for your work. Anger flares because your professional boundaries are violated. A loved one very late without calling. Anger might relate to safety needs or the need for consideration. Even small things, like a spouse turning on the light when you need sleep, that violates a need for rest. So instead of just reacting, pause and ask, what need or boundary is this anger highlighting right now? That shift to introspection is powerful.
Listening to our own emotions, really listening.
Exactly. And often the anger we show is just the tip of the iceberg. It can be a secondary emotion.
Secondary, meaning it's covering something else up.
Precisely. Masking more vulnerable primary emotions underneath. Things like hurt, fear, anxiety, sadness, grief, helplessness, powerlessness.
Shame, embarrassment.
Yes, disappointment, guilt, insecurity, all those. Sometimes it feels less vulnerable, maybe more acceptable socially, to show anger than to show fear or hurt or shame.
So anger is like a shield.
It can be a
Maybe not.
protective shield or a way to shift blame outward, away from feeling vulnerable. If someone feels deeply hurt by a comment, they might lash out in anger instead of saying, "that hurt." Recognizing this secondary anger is crucial. If you only address the surface anger, the root caused the hurt, the fear remains untouched, and the anger will likely just keep coming back.
Wow.
Effective anger management involves developing emotional literacy, learning to identify, understand, and tolerate a wider range of feelings, including those vulnerable primary ones.
So next time I'm angry, I should maybe ask, okay, but what am I really feeling underneath this? Hurt, scared, that's huge.
It is. And when anger is understood and managed well, it can be a potent force for positive change. That energy, that conviction, when channeled constructively, it can fuel efforts to address injustice, personally or socially, motivate you to solve frustrating problems, give you the push to assert yourself, protect your boundaries healthily, energize self-protection when needed.
But the key is managing it constructively.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Assertively, not aggressively. That catalyst function depends on healthy management. And
Right.
sometimes, remember, chronic anger isn't just your problem. It might signal persistent issues in your environment, relationships, even society.
Yeah.
Effective management might also mean changing the external situation.
Right. Sometimes it's not just about internal coping, but external action too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get specific. What usually lights the fuse? What are the common triggers for anger?
Yeah, anger rarely just appears out of nowhere. It's usually sparked by triggers, internal or external. Recognizing your triggers is fundamental. It lets you anticipate situations and prepare.
Okay, let's start outside. External sparks. Situations, people.
Oh, loads. Frustration is a big one. Blocks goals, unmet expectations, traffic jams, project delays. You know the drill. Perceived injustice or unfair treatment. Feeling wronged. Seeing rules broken. Discrimination, betrayal. Potent triggers.
Definitely.
Feeling threatened or attacked physically, or maybe your self-esteem, reputation, beliefs. Disrespect or humiliation. Rudeness, condescension, public embarrassment.
Yeah.
Interpersonal conflict, obviously. Arguments, tension with others. Criticism, especially if it feels unfair or harsh. Losing control over a situation. And major stressful life events can just lower your overall anger threshold, make you more reactive.
Makes sense.
But it's crucial to remember, triggers are subjective. What infuriates one person might barely register for another. Your beliefs, values, past experiences, current state, they all filter how you perceive things. Identifying your triggers is personal.
Right, creating that personal button inventory. What about internal factors, the psychological or physical stuff inside us?
Yes, the internal Tinder. Mental health conditions are a big one. Anger is often a symptom or co-occurs with things like depression, OCD, substance use disorders, ADHD, ODD, bipolar disorder, PTSD, anxiety disorders. Treating the underlying condition is often key to managing the anger.
Okay.
Past experiences shape us deeply. Your upbringing, maybe you learned unhealthy anger expression or were taught to suppress it completely. Trauma and abuse can leave unresolved anger, heightened threat sensitivity. Experiences of systemic issues like discrimination can create deep-seated anger.
And physical factors.
Absolutely direct impact.
Chronic pain.
Constant frustration, lower threshold. Hormonal shifts, menopause, PMS, thyroid issues affect mood. Fatigue, poor sleep. Major impairment to emotional regulation makes you much more prone to anger.
Yeah, I get way grumpier when I'm tired.
Exactly. Even poor nutrition or dehydration can destabilize mood. Basic self-care builds resilience. And grief, of course, often involves anger as a natural stage.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is: mind, body, past, present. You mentioned perception earlier, too. How do our thoughts specifically fuel anger?
This is absolutely critical. It's rarely just the event, it's our thoughts about it. Cognitive appraisal. Pain or frustration plus anger-triggering thoughts equals anger.
What kind of thoughts?
Often, interpreting actions as intentional insults, rigid beliefs about fairness, how things should be, how people must act, and cognitive distortions, those irrational, exaggerated thinking patterns.
Like what?
All or nothing thinking, personalization thinking, it's always about you, catastrophizing, expecting the worst, mind reading, assuming you know others' intentions, and those rigid should or must statements.
Ah, the shoulds.
Exactly. They set you up for anger when reality doesn't match. And this explains why triggers are subjective. Your history, beliefs, thought patterns prime your interpretations. A neutral event for one is a provocation for another because of their underlying mental framework.
So our thoughts are like the accelerant on the fire.
A perfect analogy.
Huh.
And that's why identifying and challenging those thought patterns is central to cognitive behavioral anger management.
Okay, so triggers can be external, internal, physical, mental, and heavily influenced by our thoughts. Understanding that diversity seems like the vital first step.
Absolutely. Towards personalized management.
Right. So, we know what sparks it. How does it actually look when people express anger? What are the different faces of fury?
There's a whole spectrum, really. Often learned habitual ways of expressing it. We can group them into a few main styles.
Let's start with the obvious ones, outward expressions.
Yeah, the ones most people recognize. Shouting, cursing, slamming things, threats, verbal abuse, even physical aggression towards people or objects.
The classic losing it.
Right. Often retaliatory, aimed at intimidation or control. Might feel like a release in the moment, but it's usually destructive. Damages relationships, escalates conflict, can have serious consequences.
Okay, what about when people don't blow up like that, the inward expressions?
That's when anger gets turned inward, suppressed. Maybe because they believe anger is bad, or they fear the consequences of showing it.
How does that look?
Excessive self-criticism, denying your own needs, isolating yourself, ruminating, just dwelling on angry thoughts without release. In severe cases, even self-harm.
That sounds damaging.
It is. Suppressed anger doesn't just vanish. It often morphs into other negative stuff. Chronic irritability, anxiety, depression, and it can cause physical health problems too, festering inside.
Bottled up and corroding from within. Okay, what about the sneaky ways? Indirect anger.
Passive aggression. Indirect, avoidant. You avoid direct confrontation but still convey displeasure subtly, often frustratingly.
Examples.
The silent treatment. Sarcasm disguised as humor. Sulking. Procrastinating on purpose, doing a poor job, spreading rumors, withdrawing affection.
Ugh, that stuff drives me crazy.
Exactly. It's damaging because the real issue isn't addressed openly. The target is often confused, frustrated, no clarity, no resolution, just breeds resentment, mistrust. Insidious, really.
It's like anger in code designed to create distance. So are there healthier ways? Direct ways?
Absolutely. Constructive assertiveness. That's the goal. Communicating your feelings, needs, boundaries clearly, directly, calmly, respectfully, without aggression or passivity. Mutual respect is key.
How do you do that when you're angry?
Use I statements, focus on your experience. I feel frustrated when. Not blame, you always. Be specific about the behavior causing the anger. State your needs clearly, calm but firm tone, appropriate body language, not threatening. And crucially, listen to their perspective too. Open to dialogue. Solutions.
So it's about resolving conflict, getting needs met, strengthening relationships.
Yes, that's the aim. Assertiveness facilitates positive outcomes. The other styles usually fail at getting needs met healthily and often make things worse.
Okay, finding that balance between doormat and bulldozer.
Reference.
That's really clear. Now, the consequences, we've touched on it, but what's the real long-term price of unchecked rage? On health? On life?
The costs can be really steep, sadly, impacting almost every area of well-being when anger is chronic, uncontrolled, or expressed harmfully. Physical health, mental well-being, relationships, even thinking clearly.
Let's start physically. How does chronic anger harm the body?
That intense physiological arousal, that fight or flight repeatedly switched on, it takes a toll. The cardiovascular system is hit particularly hard.
Heart problems.
Yes. Strong links between chronic anger, hostility, and frequent intense outbursts, and increased risk of high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, arrhythmias, even heart attacks and strokes.
Wow.
Research shows heart attack risk can spike significantly in the hours after an intense anger episode. More intense anger, higher risk. Even brief surges can impair the heart's pumping.
That's alarming. I didn't realize the connection was that direct and strong. Other physical effects.
Digestive system issues: pain, constipation, diarrhea, worsening IBS symptoms. The stress response diverts blood from the gut, weakened immune system, making you more prone to infections.
Okay.
Plus things like tension headaches, skin problems like eczema or psoriasis, insomnia, chronic muscle tension.
Oh.
It really affects the whole body over time.
So it's not just in your head. What about mental and emotional well-being, the psychological toll?
It's substantial. Chronic anger increases the risk of other mental health disorders, anxiety disorders, depression, sometimes linked with substance abuse, using substances to cope, which then lowers inhibitions, increases irritability, a vicious cycle. The constant high alert means chronic stress, elevated cortisol, with all its negative effects, and just pervasive emotional distress, frequent irritability, mood swings, feeling hopeless or overwhelmed, persistent guilt, shame, resentment. It creates a lot of inner turmoil.
Sounds exhausting, miserable. And relationships must suffer hugely.
Devastatingly, often, uncontrolled anger leads to arguments, misunderstandings, emotional pain for loved ones, explosive outbursts, passive-aggressive stuff, just poor communication. It all erodes connection.
People pull away.
Often, yes. Others withdraw to avoid the conflict or distress, leading to social isolation, loneliness, which can then fuel even more stress and anger for the individual. A really negative feedback loop.
Anger pushes people away, isolation breeds more anger, and you mentioned it impairs judgment, too.
Yes, anger significantly messes with cognitive processes. Those physiological changes interfere with rational thought.
Makes it hard to think straight.
Exactly. Impairs judgment. Makes you more likely to be impulsive, make rash decisions you regret, take risks, misinterpret cues. You tend to rely on quick, superficial thinking heuristics rather than deep analysis. Leads to poor choices.
And those poor choices can lead to more anger.
Precisely. It's self-perpetuating. Anger clouds judgment, impaired judgment leads to anger-provoking actions. It really highlights why managing anger before it gets to that point is so critical.
This is sobering. The potential long-term damage is huge. It really motivates wanting to manage it better. So let's get to solutions. What are effective strategies for taming this tempest?
Thankfully, yes, anger is manageable. There are lots of evidence-based strategies. The goal isn't suppression, but developing skills to recognize it early, understand its messages, and respond thoughtfully, not impulsively. It usually takes a mix of approaches, thoughts, body, communication.
Okay, where do we start? Foundational skills. Building the toolkit.
The absolute cornerstone is self-awareness. Really understanding your personal anger landscape.
Meaning?
Identifying your specific triggers, situations, people, thoughts, internal states. Recognizing your early warning signs, those subtle physical cues, emotional shifts signaling anger is building, and understanding your typical response patterns, how you usually react.
How do you build that awareness?
Things like keeping an anger journal or log, paying close attention to body signals, reflecting on past incidents, cultivating general emotional awareness. This allows you to intervene early before it escalates.
Becoming a detective of your own anger. What else is foundational?
Emotional intelligence, or EI, the ability to perceive, understand, use, and manage your own emotions, and understand and influence others' emotions too.
How does EI help with anger?
Key parts are self-awareness, knowing your emotions, self-regulation, managing impulses, staying calm under stress, and empathy, understanding others' feelings, which helps de-escalate conflict. Developing EI helps you recognize anger early, manage responses, communicate better, navigate conflicts, reducing problematic anger overall.
So it's awareness of self and others' emotions. Okay, specific techniques. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, comes up a lot. How does that apply?
CBT is highly effective because it targets the link between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The core idea: change unhelpful thought patterns, and you change the emotions and behaviors that follow.
What are some key CBT techniques for anger?
Cognitive restructuring is central. First, identify those negative automatic thoughts that pop up when you get angry, distorted assumptions like always, never, catastrophe, can't stand it. Recognize common distortions, all or nothing, personalization, catastrophizing, mind reading.
Then what?
Challenge them. Examine the evidence. Is this 100% true? Another way to see this: what would I tell a friend? Then replace them with more balanced, rational, realistic thoughts. Reframe the situation. Instead of, this traffic ruined my day, maybe this is frustrating but temporary, I can handle it.
Actively changing the inner script. Any other CBT tools?
Thought stopping. When you catch yourself spiraling into angry thoughts, consciously interrupt it. Visualize a stop sign. Silently say, stop. Creates a mental pause to redirect your attention.
Okay, taking control of the narrative. What about calming the body and mind directly? Behavioral, somatic techniques.
Yes, crucial for reducing that physiological arousal. Relaxation techniques activate the body's calm response, countering fight or flight. Regular practice is key.
Like deep breathing?
Exactly. Deep breathing, diaphragmatic, 4-7-8, box breathing, longer exhales, lowers heart rate, blood pressure. Progressive muscle relaxation, PMR, tensing and releasing muscle groups, releases tension, increases awareness of relaxation. Visualization or guided imagery focusing on peaceful mental scenes reduces stress, shifts focus.
I hear a lot about mindfulness and meditation too. How do they fit in?
Mindfulness is about paying non-judgmental attention to the present. With anger, it helps you recognize early signs, observe the feeling without reacting instantly, create space between trigger and response, and see emotions as transient they pass.
How do you practice that?
Simple exercises, mindful breathing, body scans, just labeling the emotion non-judgmentally. Anger is here. Helps you feel anger without being consumed by it.
Learning to sit with it without acting out. Now, what about venting? Yelling, hitting pillows, does that help? Blowing off steam?
That's a really common myth, actually, largely debunked. The goal is to reduce arousal. Activities that increase arousal, yelling, hitting, even vigorous exercise sometimes don't usually help long-term. Can even exacerbate anger or reinforce aggression. Rage rooms, not therapeutic. Calming the nervous system is the aim.
Good to know. So venting might feel good briefly, but backfires. Okay, what about anger in relationships? Communication skills.
Vital, since anger often happens interpersonally. Assertive communication is key, expressing needs clearly, directly, respectfully. No aggression, no passivity.
Techniques for that.
I statements. I feel, not you did. Practicing saying no. Appropriate body language, keeping emotions in check, prevents misunderstandings, gets needs heard, reduces resentment.
And problem solving.
Yes. Addressing the root causes of triggers. Identify the problem, stay calm, listen actively, brainstorm solutions together, choose one, make a plan. Shifts from reaction to collaboration.
Turning conflict into problem solving. You mentioned DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. How does that help with intense anger?
DBT is great for intense emotions, emotional dysregulation, balances acceptance and change. Key skills include mindfulness, opposite action, doing the opposite of the unhelpful anger urge, like speaking gently when you want to yell.
Opposite action. Interesting.
Also, tip skills for rapid de-escalation. Temperature, cold water, intense exercise, brief burst, pace breathing. Dear man for assertive communication. Self-soothing techniques using the 5 senses. Provides in-the-moment strategies for intense anger, impulsivity.
Lots of tools there. Seems like a broad toolkit is helpful. What about general lifestyle approaches, long-term support?
Absolutely crucial for building resilience. Regular physical activity reduces stress, boosts mood, burns tension. Effective stress management, meditation, yoga, hobbies. Nature makes you less susceptible to triggers.
Sleep.
Critical. Adequate sleep is vital for emotional regulation. Balanced nutrition supports stable mood, avoids blood sugar crashes that cause irritability. It's about creating a foundation of well-being, making anger easier to manage when it arises. Build that buffer. And remember, practice. Anger management is a skill developed over time. Reflect, adjust, be patient.
This is a really comprehensive set of strategies. Now, sometimes self-help isn't enough. When should someone consider professional support? What are the signs?
That's really important. Seek professional help if anger feels out of control frequently, if it's intense or happens often, if it's negatively impacting relationships, work, daily life.
Other red flags?
Saying or doing things you deeply regret when angry, if it involves verbal or physical abuse, if it leads to self-harm, if it seems linked to other mental health issues, or just significantly undermines your quality of life. If you see these signs, talking to a mental health professional is a really good idea.
What kind of therapy helps?
Several types are effective. CBT is often the first choice, targets thoughts, builds coping skills. DBT is great for intense anger, emotional dysregulation. Family therapy, if anger is rooted in family dynamics. Psychodynamic therapy explores deeper roots, psychoeducation, skills training. Sometimes medication for underlying conditions. A professional can help figure out the best fit.
And do these therapies actually work for anger?
Yes, generally very effective. Research shows significant reductions in anger, aggression, improvements in problem-solving, communication. CBT has high success rates across many groups. Arousal-reducing strategies like relaxation, mindfulness have strong evidence too. Accessing treatment can be a challenge sometimes, though. We need responsive, accessible services. But help is definitely effective when you can get it.
That's really encouraging. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main message about living with anger?
Remember, anger is natural, informative, and manageable. It's universal. It signals needs, boundaries, injustice. It can be a positive motivator. The goal isn't eliminating it, but developing a healthier relationship with it, understanding its messages, responding constructively.
Skillfully navigating the fire, not just trying to stamp it out or getting burned. Long-term strategies for that.
Continued practice of the skills, building a supportive environment, healthy relationships buffer stress, offer safe practice space, self-compassion, crucial when you slip up. Kindness, not self-criticism, breaks negative cycles. And maintaining that holistic lifestyle exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management builds resilience. A healthy relationship means managing outbursts and using anger signals assertively to address root issues, transforms anger into an asset for growth, relationships, goals.
That's a really empowering way to look at it, working with it. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Absolutely. You can understand and manage your anger. Psychology offers evidence-based paths to calmer waters. It's not about eliminating anger, but making it manageable, understandable, useful. With commitment, practice, support, mastery is possible. That inner fire can be tamed and directed positively for a fulfilling life.
So for you, the learner, remember, anger is complex, yes, but understandable and definitely manageable. You've now got a solid framework and practical tools to navigate it more effectively.
Yeah, take some time, reflect on the triggers, the patterns we discussed. How do they resonate with you? Maybe pick one or two techniques that stood out and just experiment. Small steps make a big difference over time.
This deep dive gave an overview, but the journey is ongoing. If this was valuable, consider exploring specific techniques or therapies further. Lots of great resources out there.
And maybe sit with this question. Now that you understand anger's potential disruptive and motivating,
Mhm.
how can you shift your perspective? How can you start listening to its messages, not just reacting to its heat? That's a powerful thing to explore.